All right, welcome back to the lunch table, food for thought. I'm Nico Blitz. You already know how to hit that subscribe button. You already know how to hit the subscribe button. Wow.
Hit it.
Well, it's a new year, 2020, the first podcast we're recording in the new decade. Shout out to my next guest. He is the official photographer of the Chainsmokers and also Zedd.
Yes.
And he's also taken a whole bunch of photos for Steve Aoki and G-Eazy. Danilo Lewis, what up, man?
How you doing, my man?
It's nice to have you, man. My homegirl, Ann, she actually put me on to you, and then once she told me what you did, I was like, you know what? I haven't had a photographer in here in a minute, and I could just tell based off all the photos that I've seen on your website, DaniloLewis.com, I'm like, wow, he's kind of been everywhere across the world.
I try a little bit, but thanks for having me. I'm honored. First one of the decade. I like it.
First one of the decade, man. You actually just got back from India, too.
Just got back.
How was that?
Amazing, actually. I love India. Fans are the most ridiculous fans I've ever come across. Extremely passionate. They know every lyric. They know everyone's names on our crew.
Yeah.
It's the most insane thing ever to me.
Well, it's crazy to me how you're basically the Chainsmokers photographer, but then you have fans over in India saying like, hey, can you take a photo of me like with your name on it?
That's still to me pretty surreal that they'll make like posters with my name on it because they just want a photo. I'm just like, I'll take 1,000 photos of them, regardless if they asked or didn't ask. But seeing it, it's one of those things. It's just kind of like, wow, it's very surreal to me.
Well, I guess in some way, like your name has really just been circulating within the Chainsmokers community, and you've become like a household name to their fans.
Yeah, definitely. Their manager the other day, like he made a joke. We were just talking about Instagram and how to get verified and things like that. And he was like, hey man, like how many fans do you think of like the like how many of your followers are Chainsmokers fans? And I was like, probably like 98% are Chainsmokers fan. And then he mentioned like another artist. I was like, well, they're still Chainsmokers fans anyway. So regardless if they were following me from the other artists, they're still Chainsmokers fans.
So then when did you notice that 0% ended up becoming like 98?
I would say after year 2. So I've been with them now for 4 years. This year will be 5 years. Mm-hmm. After year 2 with them, it's I think when their fans really were like, oh wait, this guy is on here all the time. He's being tagged all the time. And they were slowly going into my page and we're like, well, the photos are on their page, but he's posting more photos that we don't see them posting. And that's when it was like clicked on them. And that's just, I remember I was at, I want to say like 4,500 fans. And in 1 year, it shot up to like 25,000.
That's crazy.
Just from their fans just realizing finally, they're like, oh, wait, no, this is the guy. This is their guy.
Yeah.
And it just shot up.
That's what's up, man. I mean, I think to be a photographer in the sense, because photographers don't necessarily get the light that they deserve. You know what I mean? Like you're always like the background person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? No one necessarily sees your face, but you're a pivotal person to all these moments because you make the fans over there feel like they're a part of something. You know what I mean? Like, let's say you take a photo, then the fans are like, yo, that's me, like right over there, even though it's just like a little speckle of something.
I do get those messages where like, hey, I'm in that photo on the right-hand corner. I'm like, how can you see that? Like, but at the beginning, I always was like, you know what? I'm the behind-the-scenes guy. I'm going to try to stay behind the scenes. And it was Drew and Alex who were just like, hey, man, like, take advantage of it. Like, put yourself more out there. Like, show your face.
They
like,
said
do this,
take advantage of our situation.
Yeah, they really were. Like, they're so good at doing that with all their like staff and crew members. And it was a little like I fought it for a while, and then once I started seeing like the fans like I say like making posters or like messaging me all the time, or like if I at a show like they'll come to me and say like, hey man, like I love everything you do. I love the photos and this and that and the other. I'm just like, wow, thank you. Like the guys are playing. Like you should pay attention to them. Don't pay attention to me. But it was like little by little. That was like I started to enjoy it more, and I was like, okay, now I'm gonna start doing more and more of this, like show my face and things like that. Yeah.
So I think also from like a fan's perspective too, like what was your background like? How did you end up getting into photography, and then eventually leading up to becoming the photog for the Chainsmokers?
Well,
loaded question, by the way.
yeah. Background as far as photography, it was always a hobby. Like in high school and college, I was that friend with the camera always. I enjoyed taking photos of my friends, going out, parties, anything like that. I was just
he was the one at the club where everyone was like, hey, take my iPhone.
Yeah. But this is before iPhone. So it was yeah. It's like right when everybody's like, which like if you had the point and shoot, you were that friend. You were just like, yeah, he's the one who's gonna have the photos.
Him. Yeah.
But photography wasn't like something I pursued for a while, it was just, I just had cameras. I enjoyed taking photos of things. I enjoyed exploring and doing like nature and like landscape stuff.
Yeah.
Because I had a day job completely different from what I do now. And it was my best friend in DC who he was starting out as a DJ. And he asked if I could, because, I was always took photos. He was like, hey, I have this big gig coming up. Can you come take photos of me? And I was like, sure. And that's where I discovered like nightlife and concert photography, which I didn't know was a thing. This was like 10 years ago now.
That's when he started getting in the rooms that were just musty, smelling like ash.
Yes.
Sweat dripping from the ceiling and whatnot.
Him and I definitely did a few venues that were just like, we look everywhere like, all right, we'll make it work somehow. We don't know how, but we'll make it work. But yeah, and he's the one who sort of opened the door for me to see this other world that I had no idea existed. And little by little, I discovered like promoters and club owners and managers, artists, other photographers. Like I would say the other photographers, meeting other photographers who were doing this, longer than I had, was what really was like, wait, there's guys out there making money doing this? And how are they making this money? How are they getting these jobs? How are they making this a career? And that's where I like zeroed in and was like, okay, like how can I do that? But I still had my day job. My focus wasn't solely on that. And it was just as it grew and sort of this industry grew, I just, kept learning, and that's what kind of got me to where I'm at now.
But at one point you would have to sacrifice the day job because you were probably like super booked with all these gigs. When was that like turning point, if you can recall?
I got offered this tour that I was not able to do because I couldn't get off of work. I always say this. I was very lucky that my boss at the time was he was very open with me doing this if it didn't affect like too many days. Like if I needed to take a Friday off, it was like take a Friday off, go shoot that weekend festival, come back on Monday. I would shoot the festival all weekend, and on Monday morning I was at my desk ready to work again. But this tour, I got offered this tour, couldn't do it, couldn't get off of work. The tour, started, and I could see all the posts on social media, and it was eating at me. Like it was crazy.
You're like, I should be on this fucking
tour.
Yeah,
I just kept saying, I was like, I had it. Like this is what I had been working towards to, and it was right there. I had it in my hand, and I couldn't take it. But my focus was still on my work, so I just couldn't. I couldn't figure out what was the next step. And if it wasn't for my boss who came up to me and was like, "Hey, like, I can see that your focus is not here anymore. I could see your focus is somewhere else. Damn. I think you should take advantage that it's happening now and go do something with." I legit thought he was firing me, and I was like, "Am I being fired? Like, what's happening here?" He was like, "No, go do it. Put yourself in there. Go at it 100,000,000%. If it doesn't work out, you can come back and we'll talk about this."
Damn.
But yeah, so that's
shout out to him.
Yeah, shout out to him. I always like to tell that story because if it wasn't him saying that, I wouldn't have actually taken the plunge into it.
Well, because I think that we live in this day and age where we become slaves to whatever our job is, wherever like the employer is who's paying us the most money, and we're not really given that option or that stamp of approval from our bosses to be like, "Hey, like I can tell you don't really want to be here, so go ahead and pursue your shit." But if it doesn't fall, fall through, like you're always welcome to come back, because at that point he probably recognized you were a good worker anyway.
Yeah, he knew. I mean, I had just actually maybe like a few months before that conversation had won an award for the top representative.
Got you.
in our region. So it's not like I wasn't putting my all in it. So
that's not like you were the guy who was there for like 3 months.
Yeah. I was there for 5 years.
Yeah,
almost.
That's crazy.
But yeah, so that's what literally made me take the plunge into it full time, which was now 6 years ago. And that's where it sort of started. Like, I mean, the first week was tough because I had no idea what to do. I remember sitting at my desk, opened my laptop, was like, it was quiet. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Closed the laptop back again. I was like, all right, let me just decompress from the mindset I have of my day job, which I knew how to do that. Open my computer, numbers come up, let's start going at it. So I didn't have that. I had to sort of reprogram myself to be like, okay, you don't have that comfort zone anymore. You need to figure this out on your own. And I took a week off. Next Monday, I remember I opened my laptop again, and that's when I was like, okay, this is what I need to do. And it was just essentially going through my emails, all the people that I had met before, everything that I had, all the Rolodex that I had been building the previous, like I want to say like 3-4 years into this. And that's when I started just hitting everybody up. Like, hey, I'm doing this full time. Like, I need work. And little by little, it started to happen.
I see what it is. I see exactly what your first step was. I feel like your first step couldn't have happened if you didn't have those 3-4 years of experience prior, because basically your whole thing was with the network that you currently had, you're just like, hey, like any gigs you have, and then you kind of just like fish for whatever's like out there.
Yeah, definitely. And like those previous 3-4 years, I had been working at this venue, and that's the venue that really gave me the opportunity. Yeah, I didn't know I was doing this. I didn't know this was happening, but I was collecting all those emails, all those names and phone numbers, and everything. I had it saved, and that's what made me realize. I was like, hey, some people know me. I just need to get in with someone and expand on that and show them what I can do and the reasons why I'm in this positions to photograph these sorts of events. And that's sort of what kicked it off. And yeah, never looked back.
So do you think that, let's say somebody who's just completely starting out, someone who like just went to like Best Buy or something, bought a camera, like, do you think it would be, I don't think it would be that easy for someone to just do what you did unless they already had that network to kind of build off of.
I agree on that, and especially now because it's so crazy saturated. The competition, there's kids that I meet all the time that are 21 years old that I'm like, this guy's more talented than I am, and I'm 10 years older than he is. But I would say it's a matter of a few things. Like you can start. There are ways that you can find work. There are ways to kind of get your foot in the door. It's a little hard, yes, but you just got to keep trucking. You got to keep at it, and something will hit.
Yeah.
But I always tell, like one of the best things you can do is you just picked up a camera. You need to learn a million things right away if you really want to get your foot in there. If you're just going to think this is just for fun and you just not really put your all into it, it's not going to work out.
But I think that's where the saturation comes from too. I think we hear this word saturation a lot, like, oh, hip hop saturated with so many rappers, pop is saturated with so many singers, photography, now you're also competing with iPhones too.
Yeah.
But I think that word saturation needs to be taken a little bit more lightly, because the chances of one person really going and putting their full force into photography versus the 99 other people who are just going to buy a camera just to buy a camera just to say, I'm a photographer now, or I could take photos of you just here for the next month or so and then be done with it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's more chances people are just going to not do it than actually do it like full time.
I agree with that. And you see it often in like the forums and the Facebook groups, and it's like all these arguments over people doing free work, and like you're doing a disservice to this industry. And in my head I'm like, well, you shouldn't worry if you're doing your job. Like if this kid is have to get his foot in the door by doing free work, he's doing what he needs to do. Eventually he's going to learn that doing free work is not the right way. But I'm not worried about these kids because I know I'm doing my job. If I'm not doing my job and somebody else takes it, he's probably more deserving of that.
But I do also think that free work just in the beginning is
it's completely fine.
It's the first thing that you need to do.
Yeah, otherwise there's no way to learn how to even go about charging for any of this if you don't do free work.
And also as a consumer, you'll see the difference in quality between getting somebody for free and paying like $500-$600 for a professional photographer.
And I will say this in regards to music is managers will see that, labels will see that, the artists will 1,000% see that, because to them they obviously they have their image, they have their way of how they things should look. And a free photographer compared to a paid photographer, they're going to tell them, they're going to be able to see the difference. And eventually they'll move away from that. Or they'll say, this kid may have something there. We're going to keep riding with him. We're going to teach him things. We're going to, as we evolve, he will probably evolve, and they're probably going to offer him money. And, you just need to stick with it. It's like, it's coming,
I hear you. So then when does, after you quit your job, when does the work, end up becoming the work you do for the Chainsmokers?
It came through one of the venues that I worked at. It's called Echo Stage. It's currently the #1 venue in the United States, #2 in the world. Yeah.
Where's this?
Washington, D.C., baby.
Oh, it's in D.C.?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It is an incredible venue. The owners did one of the most amazing jobs building this venue. Like, I mean, they do everything from DJs, concerts, live music, hip hop, everything. I mean, this month alone, I think they had The Baby, they had Eric Pritz, Skrillex, like everything you can imagine
Number
happens.
two in the world.
Number
That's
two in the
crazy.
world.
Okay, I need to check that spot out.
Yeah, and that's where I got my education as far as concert photography, as far as even noticing touring photography. Because a lot of these artists that were coming in were huge artists, because it's a big venue. So like the artists that come in there are big artists. And the big artists obviously have their team, their videographers, their photographers, tour manager, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I started seeing these guys coming into my venue, touring with these guys, and me thinking, I was like, okay, how did you get that job?
Yeah.
Because that's the job I wanted to do. And it was me again, like, even though like I was already kind of established and I was already shooting a lot of festivals, it was a matter of getting these managers to trust in the vision that I wanted to bring to these artists. And that's how I met the Chainsmokers. I met them at the club at that same venue, and they liked what I did. And they saw me at festivals, other festivals that I was working at. Mm-hmm. They would see me at, in New York, LA, Florida, and they were just like, Danilo's there. Like, we trust him to get the photos we need. And that translated into, hey, like, would you want to come do this tour with us? And little by little, that's how it sort of started. Yeah.
So then what would you say, like, hypothetically speaking, what was like your pitch to all these managers? Because as a photographer, right, I think it's more noticeable from like a photographer standpoint, but what exactly was your vision that you were pitching to these people?
To them, I remember, I mean, I still have the PDF that I would send, the early PDF that I would send. I still have it because in my head, I was like, I've legit just twitched, like just I switched little things here and there, added more stuff. But it's still the same thing where it's like, hey, I've been doing this for this long. I've worked with this amount of artists. I've done this amount of tours. And what I would pitch to them is my experience. Like, I would come in, even though they may not know me, but they knew I wasn't someone who wasn't ready. Like, what I pitched was like, I'm ready to go. I'm going to provide you with the best kind of work possible because I've already been doing this. And that's essentially what I pitched to the Chainsmokers. That's even the artists that I was touring before them. That's essentially what I was pitching to them. Like, I've spent years kind of building a brand of professional instead of me just being a random kid who just picked up a camera. I was like, no, I want you to know I do this for a living. I do this as my job. Everything that I have in me, I put into this work. That's exactly what you're going to get from me. And that's what I was pitching to the Chainsmokers, to every other artist that I work with. Yeah.
Well, and that's something only experience can really, like back you up and like build your resume about because, I mean, again, going to the point, like I can be somebody who just walks into a store, buys a camera, and then do the exact same pitch. But it's like, well, what about year one? Where's your year one, your year two, your year three struggle?
And in that PDF, I included my year one. I was like, my year one, I only did this. But look at my year two, how many I did more. Look at my year three, how many more things I did.
And they were able to see the progression.
Yeah, like I showed them, what I talked about. I had proof of what I talked about. And I talk about this all the time where I tell these kids, like, hey, it takes time. Like, you have to be patient. You have to be able to put in that time. That's where you see the results. A lot of them, have... they just think that it's going to come super quick, and sometimes it does. But that is the 1% that happens to. Mm-hmm. And like we talked about, it's that 99, that other 99% that may not get it. They need to understand that this takes time.
Well, and also I've had plenty of conversations with like rappers, singers, producers who tell me like, yeah, bro, I've been doing my thing for about 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, blah, blah, blah. So then I asked them like, so have you put in your 10,000 hours to this craft, right? Because realistically, I did the math. 10,000 hours, like straight, is 6 years.
Yeah.
So even if you've been doing your thing for like 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, I guarantee you haven't been doing it for 10,000 hours.
No, yeah.
And then you got to factor in the real life aspects of just like self-care, family, so on and so forth. It's like realistically, you're probably looking at like a 15-year plan.
Oh, yeah.
And it takes a while to really do what you want to do.
And that's not counting all the hurdles you're going to come across that's going to stop all those hours. Because that's the number one thing I always hear. It's like, hey, I've hit a bump in the road. I don't know how to get out of this. I'm like, I've been there. I thought I was crushing it, and then nothing was happening for a few months. I'm just like, am I doing something wrong? It's just that, like, and you're like not putting in those hours. And it's like, how do I get up past that? And it's it just takes a lot of time.
Yeah,
You just gotta be able
I think
to
it's
grind
like
it
a
out.
constant motion of just trying to figure it out because there really is no guide map to do any of these things.
I mean, even now, to me, I find new things to try to learn. Like, because if I don't, I'm just gonna stay in the same place. And it's about not being complacent of where you're at. Because in my head, I'm like, this 2019, I went into it with a mindset of like, I have to rethink how I shoot photos for these guys. Because one of my biggest fears as far as touring is my client coming up to me and being like, we've seen this already. Like that is one of my biggest fears. That's something that keeps me motivated to learn new things.
And constantly evolve.
And I always say that I was like, you can have your grind, you can have your hustle. You should never change that. But every year that hustle and grind should evolve into something else. You have to just keep hammering. And like to me now in 2020, I'm like, what I did in 2019, I'm leaving in 2019. 2020 now we're here. I want to show them completely different things. Every time they see something, they're like, wow, like where did this come from? Why didn't we have that last year? I was like, because last year was last year. Now we're here now.
Yeah.
And then like in the next month, you're gonna see something else. In the following month, you're gonna see something else. That's where I'm at now, where I'm pushing.
From your perspective, like how have you seen, I guess, your work like change and like be not manipulated, but like evolve in different ways?
I'll say this. So I'll compare it to before 2019, where I always thought big photo, big picture, like include as many things into that one photo: the production, the fire, the pyro,
the person all the way to the right hand side.
Everything. Show how enormous this venue is. Like, I still do that. I will still include that in my delivery of a catalog. But what I changed in 2019 was like, okay, my guys are changing. They're no longer just DJs. They've been working into being a band, into having the lead singer, having a drummer, having Alex in playing piano, which most people didn't even know he played piano. And now he's front and center with it actually looks like there's 10,000 keyboards on his pod. There's not. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, probably like 6, 7 keyboards.
Yeah.
But it looks like there's so many, and most people have no idea how much work he's been putting into that. So my mindset was, I want to show people that this guy is as real as they come. To me, like I always joke with him. I'm like, there's this one photo of Elton John from Wembley Stadium. He's just on a piano, and he's kind of leaning back. It looks like he's rocking on a piano. And there must be 150,000 people at this stadium. And it's an old photo. I want to say it's from the 70s. It's an iconic photo. You can look it up. And I've legit have sent this to him several times. I'm like, this is the photo I'm looking to take of you in the future.
Damn.
Yeah, it's one of the most iconic images. But yeah, so for me, like how I went into 2019 was that was that one aspect where it's like things are changing within how their shows are. So for me, it was more of like, how do I capture that emotion, closeness, but still show a lot of what's happening in the show?
I think simultaneously too that you aren't able to evolve unless the people around you were able to evolve too. Because as you were saying, like if he didn't know how to play the piano and like do these things, like those thoughts wouldn't even come to your head.
That's
like,
true. Yeah.
As they're like doing different things in your career, you as the photographer, you kind of have to figure out a way to highlight those different things about their lives.
Yeah, definitely. And in just like that, I put myself in different touring situations, not only with Chainsmokers, where I was like, okay, I want to go shoot a country tour because they do things completely different. What can I take from these sort of shows to bring into other things that I do? Even with DJ shows that I still shoot now, I will still take, things from a live show and bring them into a DJ show. Because in my head, I'm like, he may just be a DJ. He may just be behind, a stage with CDJs. Mm-hmm. But this is still a performance. This is still a concert. This is still a humongous show.
That.
and in my head, I was like, you're still an artist. How do I portray you as that rock star instead of just, that same sort of shots you've seen all the time from DJs?
I hear you.
Now I'm taking that into like, I just want to show it differently. Like people have seen those same DJ photos 1,000 times. I want to show something different. And that's where I'm at now.
Yeah, he's talking about the smoke up in the air, all the hands up and all that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So yeah, now it's like, these guys are complete. They're all different. The shows may all look the same, but the artists are different. Mm-hmm. How do I show that personality in my photos, like your personality in my photos? That's where that's the way I'm thinking now. Like,
There's a very interesting quote that Ange had sent over to me, and let me pull it up so I don't butcher it or anything. But it was actually you had like a Q&A on your Instagram live, and then
I was like sending him shit. I'm like, look.
she was sending me a lot of shit. But then the question was goals in 2020, and you said, a lot of you asked me this. I recently spoke about it on a podcast, but I'll mention it here as well. One of my biggest goals is to change the perception of touring photography from a photographer's point of view, do more than what's asked from me, take ownership, and present more creative direction to touring photography.
Yeah. And
I feel like that quote basically summed up what was happening within the past like 5 minutes or so.
Yeah. Because I meet a lot of these photographers who are touring, and that's all they do. They're a tour photographer. And I always, when they see what I do, I always like, you do that too? I'm like, yeah, if I'm going to spend this amount of time with my artists, I'm going to bring other things to the table. And that's where that creative direction came into play, where I'm, you may not think of it, but you're with them so much time throughout the year that I'm put into positions where I have to come up with new promo photos, new press photos. We have to come up with somebody. How do we present this? Come up with an idea for this. Come up with an idea for that. And
okay, I see you. So then, in a sense, too, you're also. When I go on like an artist Instagram page, right, and they have like their whole layout, everything's cohesive, I'm just like, I like that, because whoever their creative director is, like, they're doing a really good job. So, so you too, you've been a part of like their creative direction in terms of like how everything's been built in like 2019.
And when I said do more, one of the things for me is like, I'm sorry, not do more, but the take ownership. That part to me is something that I feel like gets lost in touring photography, because you think like, I'm just here to do a job, to take photos of the show. Once the show's done, my job's over. Like, not really. Like, I do, I think of it, like, I wrote this whole rant on my notes the other day. And, I mean, I read it the other day, and it makes absolutely no sense. But it's like little, if you take it little by little, the little more things kind of make sense. But I kept saying, like, as a tour photographer, you're not just a tour photographer. You have to think about it as you're a social media manager. You are a creative director. You're a marketing manager, because your photos are being used for marketing purposes.
That is true.
And to me, it's like, okay, if I'm to take ownership of what I'm doing as a job, I want to expand on it, and I want to be able to provide my guys, any artists that I work with, that level of, I'll go back to it, professionalism. Where in my head I'm like, no, like, I just don't come in to do a show. Like, I'm gonna throw creative ideas out there. I'm gonna, if I see something that's gonna work for a photo, I'm gonna pitch an idea and say like, hey guys, I think this would look good for this, with this sort of outfit, maybe this sort of poses. I'm gonna bring that to the table as well. I'm not thinking just of the show. And that's where, like, to me, is like, you have to think of yourself more than just a tour photographer. So for 2020, I want all my tour guys to think of themselves more than just, like, I have friends who do tour managing and photography, who are assistants and photographers, who like do so much. And most people don't know that. Like, my job isn't just to come in, take photos. Like, I help out sometimes with our crew, like moving bags, like never be too big to,
that's true.
Help around. Like, you're touring with these people all the time. You're family. Like, family helps each other out. Like, I've had, some of our crew help me out with other things in regards to my work or personally, like things like that in my head. I'm like, yeah, like, I'm part of this family. Like, think of it, take that ownership to think of your job in a bigger form.
Yeah.
And that's where, to me, it's like, when I said that quote, it's like, yeah, like, this is where we need to take touring photography from now on. Don't think of yourself of just a guy who comes in to take photos of a pretty show. Yes, you do that, but there's so many other things you could be doing to expand on what you're already doing. And that not only will make, like, it just will continue to add value to your work. Mm-hmm. And that's where I'm like, I want to take ownership and bring that value to them. So when they see a new year coming, they know I'm like their number one option. They're like, no, because Danilo does so many different things. Like, this is where I said, like, if somebody takes your job, it's because they're doing that job better than you. To me, it's like, I don't want anyone doing that job better than me, So, yeah.
Amen. It's crazy how you're talking about you need to think beyond the scope of just being like a tour photographer, because prior to this podcast starting, you actually said that I think you did the album cover for one of the Chainsmokers like album, right?
Yeah.
And you remind me of my friend Eric LaRock, who also works at the radio station, and he just did the photo shoot for I think Fat Joe's recent album.
Okay.
He recently had that album cover. And I'm thinking to myself, like, seeing the way both of you are moving, and I'm just like, it never really dawned on me that a photographer took these and they ended up using it for an album.
Yeah.
And and it just goes back to the conversation about, think about, like, what would you want to see on, like, an album cover? What would you want to see on a billboard, for example? What's the first photo that you would want to see if you just look up the Chainsmokers on the internet?
Yeah.
It's beyond the scope of just, like, Instagram swipe photos and like Twitter photos.
And that's one of the first interviews I started doing when I moved here to LA. I said that they asked me how to evolve as far as like photography, and I said, I was like, I hate to say this, but we live in an Instagram world where everything needs to be right away. If it happened that night, post it that night.
Yeah.
If it happened that night and you post it a week later, it doesn't matter anymore. Like, no one's gonna care about that, and it kind of sucks to live in that world as far as photography goes. But at the same time, there's so many other things you can do to get away from that. And I've started to see tour photographers now responsible for covers of books, covers of albums, magazine covers, like, everything, where it's like, now it's not just those guys who shoot those things. Like, before, it's like they would bring a guy to shoot the cover for an album, the cover for a book, the cover for whatever. Now it's the tour photographers who are doing that because they're with those artists so much, they've already built that relationship. If an artist is comfortable, the outcome that comes with it from those photos is going to be so much better than coming in with a stranger and they're going to be a little bit more stiff and things like that. And I love seeing that. Like, I have this colleague of mine, Sam Neill. He just recently shot the cover photo for Steve Aoki's new book, and that's Steve Aoki's new tour photographer. And when I saw that, I'm like, this is what people need to know, and this is what people need to see. Like, that. This is where we need to take it. Like, take it to think, no, I want to shoot the cover for a book. Don't think of it just in Instagram terms. Think bigger than Instagram, And
that's a quotable.
Yeah.
That's definitely a quotable. Fuck, man. Yeah. I mean, I definitely hear you. Wow. Sorry, I'm kind of like mind blown because like I don't even think of things in that way in terms of like photography because I'm not a photographer.
Yeah. But with anything, like, you just got to think bigger than what you're doing. Like, what can I do better than what my job is required of me to do? Yeah.
Amen to that, man. We need more people like you in the world, bro. Just dropping gem after gem after gem. I got to ask you, because I always laugh whenever I'm watching people take photos just like in the crowd. How often are your photos candid versus quote unquote candid?
As far as the artist or the show?
As far as the artist.
50-50. I would say for me personally, it's 50-50. Mainly because in speaking of that ownership, and you said like how things look on the feeds and how well put together, I'm thinking about that. I was like, no, I'm looking for a specific shot. And sometimes I'll get that specific shot candidly, and sometimes if I don't, I'm gonna have to stage it. And it's okay. Look this way. Now you look that way.
Hilarious.
And it's just part of being a photographer, where it's like, yes, sometimes things are going to work just how you want it. Sometimes they won't. And when they won't, you got to figure out a way really quickly how to make them work for you.
Gotcha.
It's just like you got to work under that pressure, under that speed. And yeah, I've seen some photographers who everything is candid. And I've often wondered, I'm like, is it really candid? Because I know what I'm doing. And I may get some really great candid photos, but other times it's like, I got to think of what's in the background, what's around them. It's not always 1,000% candid moment because of how many things are happening. And I also have to look as to like, there's an image I want them to also have. I don't want them to be in a bad image. So if I take a photo and I'm going to deliver that photo, I'm going to deliver the best kind of photo for them to put them in the best kind of light possible. So that's where the 50-50 comes to me. Is like, sometimes it worked out just how I imagine it. And other times I'm going to have to rework it and make it what I want it to be.
Gotcha.
And yeah.
Man, this was an interesting talk with a photographer. Just because like I don't necessarily get these conversations too much, so it's like my mind is really blown right now. So looking forward in 2020, like obviously Chainsmokers aren't on tour 24/7.
Right.
So then what do you do like in between time when you're not touring with the Chainsmokers?
So, I mean, I work with some other artists as well. There's some other tours that I have some offers on that I have to kind of revise right now, see like what I will take and what I won't take. Right now, my focus is on that creative direction, like away from touring. You know, like eventually I'm not going to be a 40-year-old guy touring the world because that's just very painful on your body.
100%.
Very painful, especially on your mind. Like it's very taxing on your mind. And to me, it's like the reason why I moved to LA was for that creative direction. Like the work is here. Like the labels are here. Everything is here. And to me, is like, how do I start to build on everything that I've been doing the past 5 years, not only with the Chainsmokers, but with other artists and venues. And, you know, I do a lot of corporate shoots and branding shoots, things like that. Like, how do I take all of that and pitch it to bigger labels like Republic, Warner, and are things that I've already kind of started to do this past year. And it's what in 2020 I will expand more on it with the time I have available. I mean, I still dedicate a lot of my calendar to the Chainsmokers and some of the other artists, but the time that I'm home is me hammering into this creative direction role that I would like to take on for a bigger label. And, you know, in my head, I'm like, you know, you have a roster of 100 artists. Maybe the top 2% of those artists can afford their own touring photographers, their own in-staff photographers, but you have like 98% of your other roster who they don't have that kind of money to bring in guys all the time. But if you have an in-staff guy who's taking care of, let's say, a lifestyle shoot, that's already built into your into your label. Like that's a cost that's already into everything.
Don't be stingy with the money.
Don't be stingy with the money.
Labels.
You know, in my head, I'm like, why not? Like this is a win-win for everybody. It's a win for the label because they have the content, and a definite win for the artist because they weren't expecting this level of content. They were like, oh, I'm gonna have to hire a brand new kid.
And you get paid.
And I get paid, which is, you know, a lovely thing.
You know, I mean, it's a win-win-win situation
for everyone, you know. So that's where I'm like, you know, where I'm gonna be dedicating a lot of my time that I'm home in LA, like meetings. That's something I learned in LA. Everything is about meetings. You know, it's like we left the tour, and the second day I was home, I was doing 2 meetings. You know, it's just like it doesn't stop.
Damn.
And it's just part of it. You gotta keep hustling. You gotta keep that grind. And my grind. In my hustle for 2020 that it's evolving, it's into that right now.
I do got to ask you, being on tour for, you know, such a long time, I guess what would be one of the biggest misconceptions about touring?
That it's a party. That it's that there's 10,000 girls and drugs and alcohol and everyone's just raging every night. That is the biggest one. Because I've actually done this on Instagram where I'm sitting in the green room. My artist is I have one artist on one side, one artist on the other side, and they're reading a book or answering emails. Just chill. And it's the most quiet moment during tour. It's the best time when it's quiet time. And I'm just there, just like, everyone thinks that it's just a huge party, but nope. This is the real life.
This is the real party. Just chilling and relaxing.
And just like we're evolving into taking ownership of everything, these artists are doing the same for their careers. They're taking ownership in their businesses, you know, how they're growing, the things they're getting involved in. So that party lifestyle that you may think is happening is not, because they're taking care of so many other things. And that's the biggest misconception, that, you know, everybody's just partying. Yes, there's good times. Don't get me wrong. There are great times on tour.
A lot of alcohol involved, probably.
But 99% of the time, it's work. You know, we are there to work. You know, it's like very rare that it's, you know, it's something crazy is happening backstage.
Got you.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of crazy things, well, not too crazy, but like, what would you say is like the biggest highlight from like 2019 in regards to you touring?
The biggest, that's a good one. I haven't really thought about it.
We got time.
There's
we got time.
There's a few that I'm proud of. That in my head is like, you know, it was really amazing to have been a part of it. Like, you know, Chainsmokers headlining Lollapalooza. That was a huge one. And me being able to witness that. I remember one of the first gigs I did with them was 250 people. At Lollapalooza was like 100,000 people. And it's just like, you know, like you kind of see that full circle. You're like, wow, like this was incredible. To me, like another highlight as away from sort of concert wise was again taking ownership of helping some of our other guys. Like we have a staff of photographers and videographers that we kind of rotate, and
But you're always in there, by the way.
90% of the time, we have other guys who come in and do some other things here and there.
Yeah.
But we had a younger guy come in early in the year. It was his first time touring with us. So like I joked with him. I was like, his first tour with us, we put him through the ringer. Like we did Vegas. We did actually 2 Vegas shows, into a festival, into another festival, all in one weekend. No sleep. Like what I mean into a festival is we leave Vegas on a plane at 5 a.m. to land, at another festival, land there, maybe wait a half hour. The boys play. As soon as they're done, into a car straight into a jet into another city to play another festival, like with no sleep.
Oh my God.
And this kid, like he took it like a champ. It was his first time with us. Took it like a champ. Fast forward throughout the year, it's like it gets crazy. I was like, you got a little taste, but now imagine those 3 days augmented by 2 months. That's hard. That's hard on anyone.
Well, I'm gonna quit.
And he was, he wasn't handling the best way possible. And I just kind of caught some little comments here and there, like, "Hey man, like you don't look so good. Like, hey, you're not delivering on this." And I took him to the side and I was like, "Hey man, like you're here to do one job. Do that job. Trust me why I'm telling you to do this job. It's gonna simplify your time. It's gonna make your time management much better. You're going to deliver better work because you're not tired. You're going to deliver the actual work that they're asking you to deliver. And you're going to see like your relationship with them soar." It took him less than a day to figure it out. And he did, the advice I gave him, he took it and he followed it. And he crushed the remainder of the tour. Like even the artist was like, "Dude, we thought you were going to die in this tour. And seeing how you are now, we can see like you're putting in that work." And to me, that was one of the highlights where I was like, I didn't think of it till much later in the year. Where I was like, he came up to me, was like, actually he said it was like, "No, Danilo told me this and that and the other, and I put it into work, and now we're here." And I'm just like, oh yeah, I did do that. And that's a highlight where I was like, I really did enjoy that he, anyone else would have taken the advice and probably would have been like, what does he know about my work? And I'm like, no, I may not know about your work, but I know how they work, and this is going to help you in the longer run. And I mean, he is crushing right now. He's delivering some of the most insane work I've seen. Not only insane, but most original work I've seen in a very long time.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Give your boy a shout out.
Spencer Miller.
Spencer Miller.
That's
Shout
my
out
boy.
Spencer Miller.
That's my boy. I love that kid. Dude, that kid is crushing. Yeah.
Shout out Spencer Miller, man.
Yeah. He's.
I think the biggest takeaway from that, considering it was a highlight from your perspective, is if you have a gem, if you have a bar, if you have advice that will help the next person just elevate, even like past you, go ahead and do it. Because at the end of the day, I think we're all trying to find ways to evolve and how to evolve faster. And it would be selfish of us to not share the tools and the hurdles and the mishaps with the next person.
And I've been there on both sides where I've asked for advice, and I was lucky enough to have guys who always gave me advice when I was coming up. And I've been on the opposite side where I'm like, people came for me for advice and I was very standoffish. And I learned I was like, I'm doing them a disservice because when I asked, I got it. And to me, it was like, you know what? It's selfish of me to take the advice I got and keep it to myself. It's about passing it forward. And that's another highlight that this year, I would say 2018 and 2019, I took it upon myself to teach more and anything that I know just to give advice to whoever asked. And little by little, I started receiving DMs or texts from kids I would meet randomly at these festivals or at concerts who would say like, "Hey, I asked you this question like 3 months ago. You didn't have to answer, but you did. And I did what you said, and I'm doing my second tour now, and I couldn't be more excited. So thank you." Wow. I was like, whoa. And I would say like around like June, July, it's when I started receiving these messages. It was like, "Hey, like you said this, I'm doing my first tour. I'm doing my second tour. I'm doing my third tour." I'm just like, wow, like that's incredible. Like that's a highlight where realizing that I needed to change how I was viewing things and passing on that message. And I always tell them like whatever I tell you, whatever advice I give you, whatever works for you, that's not for you to keep. That's for you to pass it on forward to somebody else. Because you're going to get to the point where I'm at, and someone else is going to come and ask you, you need to share that, because I didn't. And I realized that about myself, that I wasn't. And I don't want anybody else to like be that way. Like, let's build a better community instead of like so many standoffish like photographers that are out there that do that. Like they get so territorial about their work. And in my head, like I said, I was like, hey, like if you're doing your job correctly, no one's gonna take your job. You know, those are the people that need to be scared.
Amen.
Yeah. So
well, Danilo Lewis, presidential elect 2020. You know what I mean?
Oh God.
Question.
Yeah.
You said to me one night on tour, you said,
Come to the mic.
Yeah, come this way.
not a lot of people know how hard it is when you're in that circle of like touring, and as somebody who's a creative.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is hard to stay creative on tour. And you looked at me one day and you said, my challenge is now, I've taken every photo of this stage that I can. My challenge is now, how do I make it not look the same for the rest of the days? And we were like,
we were halfway through.
Yeah, like we were like halfway through this tour. So how did you mentally be able to get the rest of that tour creatively as you did? Because you did do that.
Yeah, that was hard. I legit have never been mentally tired after a tour after that tour. Like I kind of pride myself on
This was after Chainsmokers
2019. Like we just finished like the World War Joy tour. And yeah, like in my head I was like, because I always receive like a shot list of things that either management or even the artists want to see out of the photos. But I can knock that out in 3 days. After 3 days, it's going to be the exact same thing over and over and over again. And I remember that fear I told you where I'm like, I don't want them to see a photo. I'm like, yeah, we saw this already 10 times.
Make it better.
You know, it's like, no, like I want them. So to me, the way I did it was there were I would say I got a little lucky in the fact that the tour had so many elements to it, like 1,000 different elements. So what I did is like, if I shot one show a certain way, I wouldn't shoot that for the next 10 days. I wouldn't shoot those moments the exact same way. And yeah, I may go back after the 10th day and revisit what I shot. I'm like, maybe I like this, maybe I didn't like this. How can I make that photo better? And it was like, you always joke, it's all about those angles, but sometimes it is about the angles. And to me, it was like, I had to remove myself from thinking of like how to shoot photos, what makes a good photo, rule of thirds, subject here. So you got to forget about all that. You got to just do what feels right. There was certain angles I would, shoot where 2 years ago, I would have never done that. And to me, it was like, I had to put myself outside of my comfort zone to see things differently or try to find different ways to shoot the same thing 41 times. And it was a task because, there was times I didn't do it, but I would say the majority of the time I was really proud that I did shoot every show differently. But at the same time, I was exhausted. Like I was mentally exhausted, having to thinking about so many different things that I had to do during that tour. Like I wasn't only just doing photos, I was doing so many other things in addition to try to find all those ways to shoot that show differently. There was some dark moments where I'm just like, it wasn't always great. I had 1 week where I was in the darkest, creative space. I couldn't figure out how to get out of it. And thankfully we had 3 days off before we had the next show. And I took time. I left the bus. I was like, I cannot be in this bus. I cannot be surrounded by our crew. I went away to Toronto. I went to see some friends that have nothing to do with music or in the industry for 3 days. Came back and I was like, okay, get it together. We got to figure this out. First show came in and I felt so relaxed. It wasn't the best photos, but there were photos that I was happy with. And when I delivered, one of the things that one of our guys drew was like, he looked at give him the photos and he's looking through them. He was like, Danilo, you snapped on this. I wasn't happy with it, but he was happy with it. In my head, I was like, well, let's go. Like, it's time to turn that, whatever that was, turn it into 1,000.
The same process you did where you took one photo and then you basically just changed it up as much as you could.
And he was like, I hadn't seen this. I hadn't seen that. I wasn't paying attention to that. I was doing things differently. It was the fact that he mentioned it to me was like, dude, where did this come from? Why didn't we see this before? And that's where I was like, that's what I need to do. The thing, they may have seen it, but I need to show it in a different way. and there were so many like again, it's 41 different shows. So I spent every show before, like I would walk around the venue before the show, or like when one of the support acts was there, I would walk through the venue and see how differently the crowd looked, how differently the venue looked with the crowd. Because there's one thing to go through a venue and see it when it's empty. It's completely different when it's filled with people, and you're like, oh wait, how do I can't get through that part now as fast as I thought, and da-da-da-da. And yeah, like to me, it was just a process every day of figuring out, today I'm going to shoot this way, that way. So it's not the same as the previous 30 shows or 20 shows.
I would like to see you write a book one day.
Someone asked me that the other day, and I was like, I don't know who in the world would read it, but maybe a little picture book, you know. But yeah, like maybe I'll take some. I've noticed that there's things I'm doing where I'm like, I'll go back and listen to certain interviews I've done. I'm like, ooh, I kind of like what I said there, and I'll just sort of write it down and put it in my notes and just sort of quote it later on and on Instagram or something like that. So maybe in another 5 years.
We'll see what happens, man. Danilo Lewis, where can everybody find you?
Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. It's the same thing, Danilo Lewis, except for Twitter. It's Danilo Lewis .com, as in .com, because the guy who owns my name refuses to give it to me. I'm not
one of those fuckers.
Yeah, I've offered him money and he won't take it. But whatever, things are here.
Whatever, man. Well, Danilo Lewis, this was a very refreshing conversation. Thank you for coming, man.
Thank you for having me.
This is the Lunch Table, Food for Thought. I'm Nico, Blitz, Danilo Lewis, and we're out, everybody.
Yay!